to the Ringer NFL show. Sheil Kapadia here with Steven Ruiz and Diante Lee. We are recording on Halloween night. We'll have matchups for week 9. We'll have our picks for week 9. But you got to tune in. You know, we gave you a reason to tune in to the Ringer NFL YouTube channel a couple weeks ago when we did the whiteboard exercise when we were all in Los Angeles. And now one of us, Ruiz, is dressed up in the Halloween spirit, surprising the others. And what better reason to tune in to YouTube than that?
Yeah, Diante came dressed as Baker Mayfield. I was really surprised when I opened up this chat today. That's what M stands for,
guys.
right?
Let's go. Ready to have a great pod, talk some NFL ball. Don't know who's dressed up as what, I guess you'd have to tune in to see.
There we go. He might have just given you a hint there. But yes, as we signed on to our video, Diante was dressed up in the Halloween spirit. I just got back from trick-or-treating, but I'm, lame dad just walking around in my normal clothes. I did see a lot of people.
My got me feeling icy John Gruden shirt. No,
there you go.
There
so
you
you're
go.
I'm
in the spirit, I guess.
You're in the spirit.
His videos are pretty scary.
Sheil is trick-or-treating as a podcaster. I like that.
Yeah, just random dad, joggers, hoodie, hat, just, random podcaster. May or may not have a real job. I did see a lot of the kids, the, boys around like the 12-year-old range, pulling the old move I used to pull, where you just get the jersey, you put it on backwards. Now, back in my day, we just, we're crisscross. I don't know. Deante, is that what they're doing? Or are kids just wearing jerseys backwards as a way to just go grab some candy for an hour?
I feel like I could go to the high school that I coach at and ask every member of the student body. And if more than one said that they knew who Crisscross was or that used to be a musical act, I would be beyond shocked. So I don't think that they're drawing the same kind of inspiration that you might have been.
It's not the crisscross influence.
No. Yeah. I guess they just think if I throw on a jersey and put it on backwards, it qualifies to go trick-or-treating. So that's okay. I told them, hey, come up, grab some candy and be on your way. And they said, thank you. And weren't, rude little.
It's about the name on the front of the jersey. These kids these days?
I know. Listen,
disappointing.
They're a little selfish. I'll give them that talk if anyone rings the doorbell here. All right. We got some good matchups for week 9. We are going to start with an NFC North matchup with some intrigue. The Detroit Lions go to Lambeau Field to take on the Green Bay Packers. Packers are 2.5-point underdogs at home. Jordan Love was limited in practice Thursday. He said earlier in the week that, yes, it is realistic that he plays, although as of this time, we don't know if he's going to play or not. Ruiz, let's start with you. You look at this matchup. What is most intriguing to you? Is it something on the field? Is it big picture about who's better in the NFC North? Is it, can LaFleur do it again if Jordan Love doesn't play? What are you looking at in this matchup?
I'm actually looking at the Packers defense because I think it's been one of the surprise units of the season. And I think we've had questions about Jeff Hafley, the first year defensive coordinator. I think this is the first time they're going to go up against a truly elite offense, and one that could give them issues in areas where they've had issues all year. Like if you look at their defensive splits, they've been really good against shotgun formation. So when you're getting teams into pass first looks, that's when they're getting the turnovers. That's when they've gotten 16 of their 19 turnovers is against shotgun formations. But when teams get under center and they run the ball, they haven't been able to defend that very well. And they haven't been able to defend the play action pass game. And you're going up against the Lions. And those are two things that they major in. So I think this is going to be a major test for Hafley's defense. And maybe he could throw a curveball at Detroit and give us something that we haven't seen so far this season. I do think there's a possibility that that's just a reaction to who they've played so far. We don't know if they go up against an offense that operates like Detroit. Maybe he'll switch things up and maybe they'll defend those looks better. But I want to see it. I want to see it on Sunday. And if we come away from this saying, oh, the Packers defense looked good, I'm going to feel real good about picking them as my Super Bowl pick from the NFC this year.
Yeah, especially because they've got some injuries too on the defensive side of the ball in this game. Jair Alexander, the safety, Evan Williams. So we'll see who suits up for them on Sunday. But I'm with you. I've been looking at these Packers defensive metrics, and I feel like I mention them once a week here that they are 27th in defensive success rate, but they are 7th in EPA per play. Well, why would there be such a discrepancy? Because they have the highest turnover EPA of any defense in the NFL. Now, getting turnovers is good, but also getting turnovers is sometimes random. There's a luckiness to recovering fumbles. There's, who are you playing? Are you playing a turnover-prone quarterback here? So I'm with you, Ruiz. This is a Lions team that is first in rushing DVOA. I mean, you know what they want to do week in and week out. They don't hide it. They're physical. Their offensive line is awesome. They've got two backs. They know how to scheme it up. So this is a game where and also the weather here, Diante, this is an outdoor game for, feels like the first time all year for Detroit, where you're in Green Bay, high of 53 with a 65% chance of rain. See, Halloween, I'm Hurricane Sheil, I'm your local meteorologist, just giving you a nice weather update for this game. So we'll see. I
didn't even think about that. Jared Goff, you always got to know the weather when Jared Goff's the quarterback on the other side. 1,000%. So I think that's a big deal.
Yeah, it is a big deal, right, Diante?
He's one of those guys that had the small hands, and then usually when you have the small hands and you're a good quarterback, it never becomes a thing. But he's a guy where it's kind of a thing.
Yeah, for sure. No, I wanted to build off of what Steven was saying, especially about the Packers defense, right? One of the reasons why I think they've been able to look so good, goes right to what Steven was saying in terms of them seeing a lot of shotgun formations, a lot of, I think, clear pass and clear run looks. The one offense that really caused them problems so far this season was Minnesota in the first half of their game against Green Bay. And they do a lot of exactly what Steven was detailing that this team struggles against. I think a lot of that is because they're so young at the linebacker position. You see guys really trying to play downhill. And that's obviously a feature of the Jeff Hafley defense, right? Is trying to play more one gap, allow guys to just go get after it. You can see them trying to crowd the line of scrimmage when formations get condensed. So that way things get simpler for their front seven. But that does mean that you're susceptible to a smart running game plan, being able to attack edges, being able to manipulate, those C gaps, those tight end area runs, and then setting up the play action pass off of that. Right. So that's something I'm really going to be looking at. We've been seeing Detroit, as they've caught their rhythm over the last 3 to 4 games, really lean on those two exact factors, is getting into condensed sets, bringing in extra tight ends, using a downhill run game to set up these design play action passes that keep the game very simple for Jared Goff. So it's entirely possible, even if the weather would be a factor and maybe an obstacle to Detroit putting up ridiculous offensive numbers, I think it's entirely possible that we come out of that game seeing Detroit have one of the highest success rates in the league in week 9, because they are just able to dominate them on early downs and really keep Jared Goff out of the obvious pass situations where you can see Jeff Hafley kind of tap into some of those mug looks and overloaded looks up front that they were throwing at teams like Houston to get their sacks and to try to force turnovers.
Ruiz, if I told you can pick any 2 NFC teams that you feel best about going to the Super Bowl, if they don't make it, you got to give up that got me feeling nicey t-shirt. Are these
straight
the
to
two?
My heart.
I know. Are these the 2 teams that you would pick, or is there somebody else who you say, I like one of these teams, but I would go with someone else in the NFC to get to the Super Bowl?
No, for me, it's 3 teams. It's these 2 teams, and then I'm going to throw the 49ers in there. I know we've written them off, but if they get Christian McCaffrey back and he looks anything like he looked last year, I think they have a chance. They have the best offensive designer in the NFL. I don't know if they have the best head coach, but they have the best offensive play caller. And they have so much talent on offense. And then they have Fred Warner on defense. When you have Fred Warner on defense and Nick Bosa, who might be a little fired up, that time, it's a special time of the year. He might be a little extra fired up, especially if something doesn't happen next Tuesday. He might have a big second half. So,
all right, but you can only pick 2. I'm telling you can only pick 2. So are you going Niners?
Lions. I'm sorry.
You're going Niners and Packers.
Yeah, I'm going. For sure.
All right. Diante, you got to give up your wonderful hat. I mean, that hat is amazing. Again, I'm going to give it away at some point here. I'm just telling you, I'm not good at keeping secrets, but let's say you got to give up that hat. If you get this wrong, who are the 2 teams? Is it these 2, or do you have or would you go Niners or someone else?
It's these 2. I mean, if we're just taking the on-field results, I do believe that if Christian McCaffrey shows up and he looks as good as he did last season, then that obviously changes the dynamic. And obviously, Philadelphia has been pretty hot over the last couple of weeks, playing weaker opponents, but they look a little bit more cohesive than they did earlier in the year. So maybe they can find their way into that conversation. But right now, I feel like these 2 teams are a class ahead. I mean, if you look at point differential, if you look at how well they've been able to design explosive offense, even the Packers, even if we don't think it's sustainable, the fact of the matter is that they have gone week after week getting after the quarterback, forcing turnovers, and that has been a piece of their team identity. I do think, at least as it stands right now, it's hard to make an argument outside of San Francisco for a team that you should feel really strongly being at the top of the NFC.
Yeah, I've got these two. Before the season, I was debating which one of them I was going to pick to go to the Super Bowl, and I still feel like they are the two. The Lions have overtaken the Ravens at number one in DVOA. I know there's no banners. Well, there's in Seattle, there was a period there where they actually were giving out banners for DVOA champs, but I know there's no banners for DVOA champs after 8 weeks, but they're third in defensive DVOA this season, which is like shocking to me. And I don't know how sticky that's going to be and whether that's going to last the rest of the way, but they're first on special teams. They're fourth on offense. So I think they've been, probably the most complete team in the NFL so far. And then I think the Packers are the team that between now and when we get to the playoffs, we're saying, man, they were the hottest team the second half of the season. Obviously, I need Jordan Love to be healthy and playing for that to be the case, but I could see that being the case. So yeah, I've got these two. I wrote the same thing. Niners lurking, Eagles improving, but I've still got the Packers and Lions as kind of the top tier there in the NFC. So should be a fun one still, again, between now and game time. We find out who's playing. Keep an eye on that weather forecast. We'll see if that flips the line at all, but that should be a fun one Sunday afternoon at Lambeau Field. All right. Game number 2 is interesting because this one before the season, we wouldn't have said, hey, in our week 9 preview show, we're going to highlight this game as one to keep an eye on. And it's got a big line. It's got a line over a touchdown. At the same time, it's one of the most interesting games of the weekend. And that's the Denver Broncos, the surprise Denver Broncos going to Baltimore to take on Lamar Jackson, we think, and the Baltimore Ravens. Lamar Jackson has been on the injury report here, so there's some mystery around that in Baltimore. Another one to keep an eye on. But Diante, this Broncos defense has been playing well. This Ravens offense has been playing well. And on the other side of the ball, it's kind of been the opposite. What sort of has you intrigued about this matchup?
To me, I need to see the Ravens defense take care of business against a rookie quarterback in a passing game that has not been impressive at all outside of its game against Carolina last week. And this is a good opportunity to do so because of the way that Sean Payton designs his passing game and the way that Bo Nix has been operating within this passing game. You're going to get an opportunity to get underneath some passes because you're going to get a lot of quick game. They're going to try to get the ball out of his hands quickly. I think that what Denver does do well in terms of being very versatile and multiple in the run game actually plays into what defensive coordinator Zach Orr does best, which is getting those big bodies on the field. Obviously, guys have been down. I know Brett Urban didn't finish the game last week. I think Michael Pierce is going to be out for this upcoming week. So they're not going to have their full complement of defensive tackles and interior defenders, but it really hasn't been a problem for them at any point, whether they're rotating guys in or out. They have really been able to play downhill. And I think that when you look at that combination of Kyle Hamilton, Roquan Smith, and Trenton Simpson all playing close to the line of scrimmage, plus you add in Odafe Owe and Kyle Van Noy and Nnamdi Madubuike, plus those guys that I mentioned earlier. I mean, it's just hard to move those bodies in the fine creases. But to me, the game is going to be won and lost on that side of the ball by the Ravens playing tight in coverage and being able to actually capitalize when they get their hands on the ball, sitting on those underneath routes and forcing Bo Nix to hold it, bail out of the pocket and try to push it downfield. And I think that if they can do that, I'll probably feel a little bit better about that defense than I have throughout the first half of the season.
Yeah, the explosive plays have been such an issue for them. Their offense leads the NFL in explosive plays. Their defense leads the NFL in explosive plays allowed. And there's been we mentioned this on the Sunday night show. I think there's been some weirdness with Marcus Williams. Why wasn't he playing last week? John Harbaugh's going like Tony Soprano. It's family business. They could have picked
the worst game. They could not have picked the worst game to bench Marcus Williams because Eddie Jackson had like the worst game of his career against Cleveland.
So going into the season, I was like, this is the best safety group in the NFL, maybe. And now it's like, what is going on with this group? Ruiz, I know you were not a big Bo Nix fan at the beginning of the season. Has any of your opinion changed? I watched that game last week against Carolina. I thought he played well in that game. It's just hard for me to say, all right, a lot of quarterbacks are playing well against the Carolina Panthers. What's your sort of state of Bo Nix as we head into this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think he can run a little bit better than I expected him to be able to in the NFL. I think he has a little more zip on his passes than I expected. But the main crux of my concerns is still the same, and that's him in the pocket and how comfortable he is with bodies around him. Even when bodies aren't around him, it seems like he's kind of uncomfortable. There was the throw against the Saints a couple weeks ago to nobody in particular where he underthrew one guy and overthrew the other guy with nobody around him, but he was throwing off platform. So I think that's the concern. And I think a team like Baltimore, even though they haven't played well, I do think they can throw some looks at you that can make you see ghosts to steal a term from Sam Darnold. So I will be interested to see how he does, but I'm with Diante. Like, if you can't pass the Bo Nix Broncos passing game test, then I have real concerns about you as a Super Bowl contender. How are you going to stop Josh Allen? How are you going to stop Patrick Mahomes, obviously? But my interest in this game is on the other side of the ball. I think this Denver defense is really good. I think they're one of those teams, like we talked about in the last segment, how Green Bay has been really relying on turnovers for their defensive performance. And it's the same is true for the Lions. If you take away turnovers, they're a league average defense. If you take away turnovers, Denver's not only the best defense in the league still, there's a wide gap. There's like a 15-point gap in terms of EPA between them and number 2. They're almost doubling up the number 2 team in terms of non-turnover defensive EPA. And you look at their splits, like early downs, late downs, shotgun, under center, they're good against it all. So I think they're going to be a team that's going to be able to make Baltimore play left-handed. I think they might be able to take away that under center run game that's kind of been percolating in Baltimore this year with Derrick Henry. By crowding the box, they're going to do it with numbers, and they're going to, get after the quarterback, and we're going to see the full measure of this offense, and we're going to see if it can play left-handed, because that was the question last year. Like, the Chiefs were able to punch them in the mouth in the AFC title game, and they didn't have a counter for it. I think Denver's going to be able to do the same. I want to see a counter for Baltimore.
To me, yeah, this game is about Baltimore's receivers against a defense that is going to play a lot of man coverage. Yeah. And I think that frustrated them at times on early downs against Cleveland because they played such tight coverage. You don't get those quick and easy flare out passes to Zay Flowers where you can go get you 6 or 7 yards if you get an unfavorable box count. It's a little bit harder to set up some of the option game because you know that everybody is accounted for. I think that this is part of the motivation, not for this game, obviously, but I think this is part of the motivation of taking a flyer on a Diante Johnson is just trying to get as many people as possible who can separate, especially early in the play, to give Lamar Jackson options that aren't going to be him having to extend. Right. And I think that this is going to be a good test for Rashad Bateman, for Isaiah Likely, for those players that can work in the seam, work in the middle of the field to separate themselves, make themselves available, and then go find yards after the catch. That's what it's going to take to beat this team. And I think that they're going to have to show well against the guys that are guarding them that aren't Patrick Surtain II, because you know that you're not going to be throwing the ball his way very often. The rest of those guys have got to find ways to take advantage of those matchups. Otherwise, the blitzes are really going to constrict what Baltimore could do offensively.
Yeah, they're going to be playing cover one. And like, my interest is what they do with that extra defender in the middle of the field, not the safety deep, but the guy in the middle that kind of lurks. Like, will they use him as a spy? Will they use him as like a zone guy who's just an extra guy to help out in man coverage? Will they blitz him? And we've seen them do different things with that guy depending on the opponent. And I think with Lamar, you kind of have to mix it up. Because if you do have a spy, I think he's going to be able to beat that. We've seen that this year. If you have that guy kind of, help out in coverage, Lamar's going to scramble on you. And then if you have him blitz, that's what I think they'll do. I think they're going to try to clog up all of the scramble lanes and keep Lamar in the pocket and do sort of a cage rush more than a rush designed to, lead to a sack. Basically, you're going to wait for Lamar to scramble into a sack instead. That's what I want to see. And I think this is the type of game where this is the reason you trade for Diante Johnson, for this type of game. Because you don't want to rely on a tight end to be your guy over the middle beating man coverage, because there's so much you can do to take away that guy. If you put a safety on him, like, that's a tough matchup for a tight end. If you have that guy in the middle doubling him, that's a tough matchup for a tight end. But for a receiver, it's a little bit easier and you have to do more things on defense to match up with them. So I don't know how quickly up to speed Johnson can get, but I do think down the line, this is the type of matchup he would help out against.
Yeah, Broncos are playing man coverage, to your guys' point, at the 5th highest rate in the NFL. And it's small, it's a small sample, but Lamar Jackson against zone, 1st in success rate, against man this year, 11th in success rate. So there has been a little bit of a difference in those two things. Again, small sample. When you were saying I just feel like, I don't want to say I have full faith in the Ravens offense because it's still relatively early in the season, but man, this is the best I've felt about them during the Lamar Jackson era. I mean, I do feel like they can play right-handed, left-handed, one-handed, pinkies jammed, whatever. Like they just feel like they can win in so many different ways and have so many different answers, and the numbers back it up. They're not only 1st in offensive DVOA, it's kind of crazy. The difference between them and number 2, which is the Bills, is the same as the difference between the Bills and the Seahawks, who are at 15. Like they have been that much more efficient than any other offense in the NFL. And then I look at the Broncos and I look at some of the schedule stuff, and I'm not hating on them, but they've had the easiest schedule in the NFL so far this season. If you look at the betting markets, and they have the third hardest schedule the rest of the way. So this is definitely a show me something game. I'm not even saying they have to win this game. If they're competitive and this is, hey, they're playing well and it's coming down to the last 4-6 minutes in the fourth quarter, I'll give the Broncos their flowers and be like, all right, I'm going to take you a little bit more seriously here. I do think there is at least a possibility that the Ravens kind of just boat race them, and this is a game that at halftime we go, okay, the Ravens are who we thought we were, who we thought they were, and maybe the Broncos have a ways to go.
Yeah, I think that's a fair way to look at it. I will have judgments for Todd Monken on Sunday night if they lose this game.
1,000%. 1,000%. I mean, because this is a style of defense that caused them problems all of last year. Right. And I think that, to Sheil's point, they've shown that they have much better answers now. I think the trust in Isaiah Likely and his development has allowed them to do some things that keep teams from blitzing them as often and as effectively as they did last season. And then seeing Rashad Bateman and Zay Flowers take the next step as route runners has allowed them to hurt man coverage in a way that they just had no shot against last year, right? Like that game against Kansas City obviously stands out as the greatest example, but that was something that was an issue for them all throughout last season. This is going to be another opportunity to really stamp the fact that there's nothing that a defense can do to constrain this offense. And if they're able to pass the ball against tight coverage and force Denver to play differently, now that opens up the door for them to get back into under center 12, 22 personnel, downhill runs with Derrick Henry. And if they can find a way to strike that balance, this will go a long way for me, even though they are clearly the more talented team. I just stylistically want to see them kind of put their foot on Denver and show that they can control the game, even against a team that challenges them stylistically.
I still think Seattle should be able to loan Mike McDonald back to Baltimore to be DC for the rest of the year. Come on. Let's get Baltimore a title, and then he can move on and do whatever he's doing up in Seattle. I don't know what it is.
I like Zach Orr. Like, I do kind of want to vent for a second. Like, we've got to find a different way. What we're doing right now is not working. And it's not, to me, it's less about design, right? Like, you can look at the game last week against Cleveland and say like, okay, they're playing cover 3 buzz. So you're dropping a safety in as an interior defender, and guys are at their spots, but they're not actually denying routes. And they'll blitz, they'll load up the line of scrimmage, rush 5 and play fire zones. They're using a lot of the same fire zone looks that they had last year. The difference between this year and last year, to me, if I'm just going by tape, is that they were also able to set up a bunch of simulated pressures. And from a coverage perspective, when they were playing zone, you could see just how detailed they were in preparing for their opponents. The Miami game, I think, was an ultimate manifestation of that, right? Like, if you watch that game, that Roquan Smith interception on the curl route out by the numbers was like the perfect encapsulation of how well coached they are to understand where routes were breaking and when the throws were coming. You don't see that on film anymore. You see a lot of guys just at spots, and then it's catches and tackles. And then you add in the fact that Marcus Williams wasn't playing in that game, and now the middle of the field is that much more accessible. I think that for them, the way that they're playing now, if they're going to continue it this way, it's going to be difficult unless Marlon Humphrey's on the field and Nate Wiggins is on the field, because a lot of what they're doing is, my guys are better than your guys, and we just expect that we're going to play tight coverage no matter what you do to us. And I just think that's a difficult way to live. And the stark contrast between that and what they were doing last season is probably why it's so bothersome to me and a lot of Ravens fans who have been watching. I think for them, they might actually be better served not running as much, just like all these different zone shells, and really lean into like what Chicago does in terms of like, they're going to play a bunch of single high. They're just going to play deep to short on everything. We'll rally and tackle and hope that basically we use different stunts and things up front to be able to disrupt the quarterback, because what they're trying to do right now by playing so aggressively is great for how they stop the run, but they are opening up so many windows in the middle of the field, and they don't have the kind of answers for that this year that they did last year.
Yeah, there's a lot more air in the coverage is what I would say. They're not tight to routes like they were. Like last year, there were times when you couldn't really tell if they were playing man or zone. Now you can tell. You know when they're playing man or zone.
Yeah, it's a measuring stick game, I would say, for if the Ravens defense gets lit up in this game. Now it's like, all right, take that cause for concern to another level, because
I don't want to put you on fraud watch, man.
Yeah,
Zach, please. I don't want to put you on fraud watch, boss.
We're rooting for the young
his
guy.
problems, though, he's following in some big footsteps. And I think especially with like the teaching aspect and like the detail aspect, I think that's the one thing they're losing. Like Mike McDonald was able to have this big menu, but you still had that attention to detail within the different, types of coverages. I think they've kind of lost that. And we've seen them not only like botch coverages, but like, for instance, I think like Kyle Hamilton has had a harder time like having to work around traffic, and he hasn't been protected from that. I think it's been too easy for defenses to kind of put him at a disadvantage with alignment before the snap. And he's had to work around that. He's so damn good that it hasn't mattered. If he would catch some interceptions, please, can we catch some interceptions going for it? But outside, that's the problem. That's what I see. That's the difference between this defense and last year, where last year was one of the best defenses in the NFL that could shapeshift. This year, maybe do a little less shapeshifting, I think is what Diante's calling for, and focus on the things you do well.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. We'll see how they perform. We'll see how the Broncos offense performs. We'll see, is this Broncos defense legit? Can they be the only team? I mean, I watched that Browns-Ravens game last week, and I was like, Lamar Jackson was fantastic.
He's still good.
It was so funny. We do all this analysis. We could have done a quick pod on that game. Ravens catch ball, win game. I mean, honestly, like on both sides of the ball, that would have been a different outcome. Instead, we got all these different storylines and narratives. Sometimes I'm watching it going, this isn't as complicated as I'm making.
That was a caveman game. It was a caveman game.
I like that. Great term. You got a good vocabulary, Ruiz. Well, he had one the other day, ambitious for Jordan Love. Now he just pulls out. Is that an original caveman game?
I just came up with it. I mean, you talked like a caveman when you said it. It just came to mind. I don't think caveman is that a vocab word. That's
I don't know. Terms. You got good terminology. Like
I appreciate it. I'm going to take the compliment.
Yeah, I'm a writer, but I can't come up with stuff like that. Like it's impossible. I'm just like, keep it simple. I even tell my kids when they're right, just keep it simple. You don't need big words to describe this stuff. But now I can steal that caveman.
Apparently, I've been pissing off a listener because I keep using incomplete as a verb. Like, he incompleted that pass. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm sorry.
I've never even noticed you do that.
Effective communication means the person that's receiving the communication gets what you're saying. You know what I'm saying, and you know who you are out there.
All right. I saw that message, but I didn't know what he was talking about. Now that you said it, now I'm like, okay, I don't remember you saying that all season, so maybe I just didn't catch it here. All right, we take a break. We come back. One more game to get to, and then we get to the pick segment. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. Colts at Vikings. Another one that, August 27th, if we were looking ahead, we wouldn't have said we're talking about this game in the first segment. But let's be honest, the Colts were the story around the NFL this week. This Anthony Richardson situation, how they've handled it, what it means for their future. Are they a stable organization? What do they look like the rest of the season? All those things. And then you had the Minnesota Vikings coming off that Thursday night loss against the Los Angeles Rams. They're hosting Indianapolis. They're 5.5-point favorites. Diante, let's start with you, because Ruiz and I kind of gave our take on the Anthony Richardson situation in the middle of the week. Where are you with this? What we've learned since then, where he said Shane Steichen didn't really give me much of an explanation. Shane Steichen's like, yeah, I think he'll play for us again, but can't say that definitively. It's just kind of gotten to a level that I did not think it was going to get to this week. What is your read on this entire situation?
All right. I've been of so many minds because there's honestly been so much coverage of it, right? And I've been trying to keep my eye on this as much as possible. So there are a lot of layers to take this in from, right? I think on a base level, we can speculate about what the bringing yourself out for a play thing might have meant to the team. We can speculate, or we can talk and analyze and rationalize like, there were drops. The offensive line blew this protection, whatever the case may be. I think that if we're just looking to diagnose why this happened, the most likely answer is that Jim Irsay watched his quarterback go 10 for 32. And then you add in the game against the Dolphins, which looked awful, and the game against the Packers, which looked awful. And the owner probably pulled his head coach and GM into a meeting room and said, no more. We're 4-4, and I think we have an opportunity to be able to compete for a playoff spot. And I feel like this guy's getting in the way. You're benching him, and you figure it out. And that's why I think the comments early this week kind of sounded so disjointed, right? You get the reporting of, Michael Pittman found out with the rest of the team. Then you get the reporting of Ryan Kelly was notified before it was made public.
Right.
And you hear Shane Steichen talk about, I think I would like for him to play again, but we'll see, like what kind of commentary is that? So, and I think that that's probably been the most frustrating is if this was really about Anthony Richardson and his development, there is a way to be lockstep in your messaging that makes it clear that protecting him in this moment is still the priority, even as you make a move that's going to look bad for him optically, right? Like the Colts could have very clearly just put out a press release and been like, hey, his development is still number one priority. We think that this is a guy that's going to lead us to win the AFC South and contend in the AFC to be a representative in the Super Bowl in the years to come. We feel like he needs to take a step back to continue to work on these foundational elements to help him out. But don't take this as anything other than giving him an opportunity to take a breath and develop and learn the offense and get more familiar with how to play in this league. And when it's his time to take over, which may be in 2024, and if not in years to come, then we'll get to that bridge when we do. But to just kind of lay it out as like, yeah, it's Joe Flacco now. And Anthony Richardson is saying my head coach didn't say specifically to me why it is that I'm sitting. I think that this just lays out so clearly the ways in which ownership meddling can interfere with the player's development. And that's one layer of it, right? On the other side of this, and I know I'm going long here, but on the other side of this, and this is where I feel like I'm taking crazy pills, I've heard too many justifications on why it's okay for Anthony Richardson to have been performing the way that he did. And if you want to use the Houston film and say, hey, DeMeco Ryans just had a beat on their protection rules and manipulated them, and that was a lot of the problems, and guys were dropping passes, I agree with you, and that's true, but that has nothing to do with the Dolphins game. Because you can turn that on, and it's just misses left and right. It has nothing to do with different points of the Packers game, which is probably his worst this year, where you're missing guys left and right. And guys are dropping passes and they are blowing protections, but you do want to see your quarterback start to show some progress along this path. So to me, I guess I'm upset from the perspective that Anthony Richardson isn't going to get as long a leash as I think he needs if the idea was that you were going to start him. But if I really zoom out and I look at his play and the way that this league works, I think that this was probably going to come no matter what if things continued on the trajectory that they were. And I'm just kind of shrugging my shoulders at it for as frustrated as I am, man, because this is just how the league goes. You don't complete passes, you lose games, and your owner feels like you have an opportunity to sneak into the playoffs. The young quarterback is always going to bear the brunt of that criticism internally. And that's all that I think this is at the end of the day.
I mean, we can talk about like the lack of progress from Anthony Richardson. What about the lack of progress from this offense and making his job easier? I think his job has gotten harder. I mean, he's the only reason this offense has been viable on early downs when he's been out there. This run game, when he's not on the field, stinks. It's one of the worst run games in the league. When he's out there, it's one of the best run games in the league and the most explosive. I wonder why that is. And you look at the overall numbers, they have a higher EPA with Joe Flacco out there, but the success rate is basically the same. The reason why the EPA is higher is because Joe Flacco has been out of his mind on third down. Now, especially on third and long, do we expect that to continue? No. And I expect them to be in a lot of third downs and a lot of third and longs now because they don't have the focal point of their run game anymore. And they're going to have to be running the game without that extra guy that the defense has to worry about. I think it's going to show up in this game specifically. You play the Vikings, a team that if you can't run on early downs, life is going to be miserable. It's going to be hell on third down. And I think Joe Flacco, his third down prowess and like how good he's been literally the best quarterback in the NFL on third down. And it's not even close by EPA. He's third in success rate. I think we're going to see that flip. And once that flips, I think we're going to see that this offense isn't all that good. And I don't think the offensive line has played well so far this year. I think the receiving core, like you look at the individuals, it's a decent receiving core with Downs and Pierce and Pittman, but they haven't performed well, and they haven't performed well at the catch point. So I don't know. I think this offense, the notion that the offense is going to improve and that Joe Flacco is the reason it's going to improve is just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, that's asinine.
I blame us. I blame the media for celebrating Joe Flacco for the fact that he wasn't Deshaun Watson. Because if you look at his stats and you look at his performances last year, he stunk outside of the Texans game where
they were winning with defense.
Amari Cooper goes for 300 yards because the Browns have injuries on defense and they can't match up with him. Outside of that, he was bad. He threw away the Browns game, like the Texans game, the wild card game early on. Like they were moving the ball. The Texans picked him off and the game was over because they couldn't do anything else. So that's the other thing I'll push back against. Like I don't think this is going to get them to the playoffs. I don't think it's going to dramatically improve their offense. And I think there's a world where their offense actually gets a little worse because they can't run the football anymore.
That part, yeah, I have no argument on that part. I guess the thing that I would come back to, if I'm going to take the side of criticizing Anthony Richardson, and I do think that there are real reasons for why things have not gone well that don't fall totally on his shoulders. You can just pull up a reel of his third downs, and I just don't see a guy who's raising the ceiling for his offense on third downs. I see a guy who does a good job of avoiding sacks. If there is one thing that he does well, he finds a way out of pressure that like only Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, like the top tier athletes at this position can do. But what I don't see often enough outside of like the Texans game and fits and starts the rest of the season is a guy who can get away, reset, and then punish the defense for blitzing him. Or a guy who's getting away and then accurately delivering the ball over the middle of the field, which is why I think you have that big dichotomy between his average depth of target and his completion rate. Some of that, I mean, and there is a correlation between the two, right? Like you're pushing the ball down the field. You don't expect to complete that as often as a guy who has a 76% completion rate, but he's throwing within 80 yards of the line of scrimmage the majority of the time. So part of that can be explained away. But on the other side, man, outside of the design shots, and this is scheme and Richardson as well, there's just nothing really happening here where you're watching film saying, oh, wow, Shane Steichen really got it dialed up and Anthony Richardson is making these throws with confidence. It's all been play action, double moves, play actions with shot designs where you're trying to hold a safety on one end to run a post from the opposite boundary. And all that's great when it connects. But I think this goes to Steven's point is they're not doing enough in between that and the running game to keep this offense on schedule. And now you're putting a quarterback who has so little experience in these high leverage, high degree of difficulty situations and basically leaving him to his own devices. So I feel like if you're Indianapolis, you shouldn't be surprised by the results you're getting. And everybody bears some culpability in their failure so far.
To your point, the third highest rate of passes that come in obvious passing situations, Anthony Richardson. This is a guy who started 23 games between college and the pros now at this point, and you're putting him in those situations. It's going to be tough and it's going to look tough, but usually you work through those things. Like if you go back to the post-draft comments, everyone involved in this decision, the GM, the head coach, the owner has been like, you got to go through the growing pains. You got to have them out on the field to develop. And now Shane Steichen is like, well, sometimes, things change. And that's what he's saying. I don't know. I don't know how he's going to learn how to navigate those third downs without going through it. Obviously, he can do the first down stuff. He's done that. He's been decent at it. He's been league average on early downs. It's the third downs that give him the problem. Maybe the solution is easier. Maybe it's a 2 quarterback system. I know that probably wouldn't work in the NFL, but just go for it. Who cares?
I said on the midweek show that I really felt like him tapping out. It was one of those things that to me, and we discussed it on the Sunday night show, I'm like, I can understand it. It doesn't seem like a big deal. But in the world of the NFL, that feels like a cult at times when you're leader, it matters. Yeah, Diante, you could probably speak to this better than we can. But just, any player showing a sign of weakness or fatigue or not being there for his teammates when everyone else is there. Again, we can look at it rationally and go, dude threw a 300-pound defensive tackle off his back. They were handing it off anyway. Who cares? I think in that world, and you heard all the ex-players come out and talk about it. And Diante, I think you nailed it with Irsay, because now I'm connecting the two. Now that happens. And then Irsay, who is heavily involved and has been heavily involved, and nothing happens there without him making the final decision on it. He's talking to his former players. He's calling up Jeff Saturday. Hey, what'd you think? What'd you think about that? He's calling up other guys. What'd you think about that? And they're telling him quarterback can't do that. That's like a bad sign. And Ryan Kelly's saying it. And other guys are saying it too. And then maybe he acts impulsively and saying, to your point, maybe he goes up to Shane Steichen and Chris Ballard and says, you got to do something. This guy can't be our quarterback right now, or we're going to lose the locker room. Or I mean, that is not beyond him. There's some owners you would say, no, they're out somewhere in Europe and they're not paying it. No, Irsay is heavily involved in all this and nothing happens without him, because it just seems like, to me, it was like it's either that or Shane Steichen feels like I'm coaching for my job here and I got to win games and Joe Flacco gives me a better chance to win games. But it's just so disjointed. Like, take a step back and think about the conversations when this dude was drafted. He barely played in college. He completed 54% of his passes. Everyone knew there was a learning curve. Zach Wilson got 2 freaking years before they even thought about moving on, and it was obvious he couldn't play at all. Like, at least there are a handful of high-level plays, and I'm with you, Diante. It's not like he's playing awesome, but there are like the flashes there where you just feel like unless he's developing bad habits, unless you feel like his confidence is getting shattered, something like that. And the messaging would have been so easy if that was the case, to your point. Right. You come out, you say, hey, sometimes you got to take a step back to take a step forward. This is our guy. We can't wait. We're going to do this special things in practice on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday to get him those reps he needs. But we just feel like in a game right now, that's not what's best for him. And we've had that conversation with him, by the way. Shane Steichen, you can communicate that to the player who is 22 years old. And unless he's lying, seems like he doesn't know what's going on here. You can communicate that in a way that makes sense as an organization. And we're having a totally different conversation here. We're saying, I don't think that's, I think he should get game reps, but it's not this volatile. It's not this uncertain about, is this guy ever going to play for you again? You spent the 4th pick on him last year. He's played 10 games. This doesn't happen in the NFL where you just give up on a guy that quickly. So it very well could speak to organizational chaos, disarray. This has not been a stable organization for years. They've cycled through coaches. They've cycled through quarterbacks just when it felt like they had a plan with the quarterback going forward. Now you have this, 5 starts into the 2nd year of his career. So I think that's well said.
I want to close with this. Like, to me, I want to close with these 2 thoughts. If you've worked in the service industry, this is something that should resonate with you. It's one thing to do something wrong, but when you do something wrong that catches the attention of your supervisor, of your manager, now it's a different level of issue. I think he could have gone 10 for 32 and lost that game and been okay. But you tap yourself out and then you go to the public and say, hey, I was tired. To your point, Sheil, you are now drawing the eyeballs of the entire national NFL and sports media. That's going to get that's probably going to get under Jim Irsay's skin. And to your point of him being reactionary, we know that this is a guy that wants to have his hands on the day-to-day anyway. And you have now allowed the team owner to step in and feel like he has to do something. And then from the player culture part that you touched on, not only in the midweek show, but now, like, I retweeted something from Cam Newton right before we started recording or started prepping for recording. And and what he said resonated with me because it's just the flat truth. It's not fair, but you're not allowed to do it. I'm sorry, quarterback. That's the way that it works. Like, yes, you can be tired after shoving a guy off of you. And if you need a beat, there's a way to communicate that to your coach to let him know, like, hey, please, no 7-step drop back. Let's just run a draw and then I'll come jog to the sideline. Or, hey,
That's what they ran. That's what they ran. They ran a draw on 3rd and 20.
Exactly. Like, or, hey, man, like, can we let the play clock run and it's 3rd and 23 anyways, and we know we're not going to convert? Can we take a delay of game just so I can catch my breath for a second? Like, there's a way to do that. I think for him to have made that decision in that moment and then turn around and not say what you need to say in front of the media, which is literally anything other than I was tired.
He was too honest. Yeah.
Like, hey, man, I got turf in my eye. My shoe was untied. Right. My calf was sore. You can say anything.
I landed on my ankle a little weirdly. Yeah, there's really anything else you could have said. And I like when they're honest. So, yeah, I feel like a hypocrite, honestly.
I thought I was going to vomit. You could say anything. And who can verify that? Nobody. What you don't have to do is go out and say, I'm not going to lie. I was tired. Anthony Richardson, young guy, lie. Okay. Lie. There's a difference between a lie and being dishonest. Okay. There's nothing nefarious about you lying in that moment. You can say whatever you want to say. What you can't say in front of the media is that I was too tired to run a draw in a 3rd and 23 situation.
You see, Diante is more coach than human at this point. Be you, Anthony Richardson. Don't listen to them. Do not listen. Listen to Brian Flores. Brian Flores is the only one with a sensible take from the NFL on this matter.
Yes, but also I do.
Play? Did you guys see the play?
If that was the quarterback on his team, though, would he be saying the same thing? I mean, he has no
on the quarterback. If it was Tua, even if he didn't take himself out.
Yeah, I mean, think about if Tua did that when he was playing for Brian Flores. I mean, so yeah, I do appreciate him saying that, but also what's his motivation to give any other type of answer? I'm with you, Ruiz.
Physical talent. That's what.
I mean, I think it, like, again, it's a reasonable thing for a reasonable human being looks at that and goes, he was tired. Look at what he just did. He needed a breather. They were handing it off anyway. Who cares? Once the ex-players started, speaking out so loudly about it, I had to rethink it and be like, all right, I forget that these places are like cults and they think about
these
things.
These are not normal people, guys.
It's not normal people. These are not well-adjusted humans. And I'm thinking about some of the defensive players I've covered in my career and how they would react to that. And they would react about it, in some type of way. So whether it's all connected or not, I mean, it's kind of a mess of an organization right now. To close the loop on this game, by the way, Kevin O'Connell with extra time to prepare for a Gus Bradley defense. I think Vikings are gonna kill this Colts team, and we're gonna be talking about this Colts team. It's like, what's going? I think the conversation is just gonna get heightened after this one. I don't think Flacco's gonna play well against the Brian Flores defense. I don't think Gus Bradley's gonna stop a Kevin O'Connell offense. And I think the Vikings are gonna smoke this Colts team.
I've seen some people say that Brian Flores is probably happy that he's seeing Flacco instead of Anthony Richardson. I disagree, because I think the last couple of weeks where they've given up 30 points, and this is the first time they've looked bad on defense this year, they've had to play a lot of single high compared to what they were doing in weeks past. And they had to play single high because they were going up against these two offenses they're going up against a running offense. Like, you can go up against a Sean McVay offense. You can't just, keep two safeties back. He's going to take advantage of that. I think they're going to be able to play two safeties back this week against more of a spread run look, and then get Joe Flacco in the third and long. And then they're going to blitz Joe Flacco, and they're going to be like, all right, you better buy time, or you're going to have to move and throw off your back foot, or else it's going to get ugly. I think it's going to get ugly.
Yeah, I think so too. We'll see. Maybe we'll be wrong. Maybe they'll get the last laugh with Joe Flacco, but I don't think that quarterback change is getting this team to the playoffs. They are mediocre in almost every aspect, where maybe they get a little lucky and they're in it for a while, but there's also a chance that this thing goes south. So, all right, I love it. Vikings Colts Sunday night. We'll be talking about that game on the Sunday night show, of course. All right. Take a break. We come back. We get to our picks of the week. All right, we're back on the Ringer NFL show. We make picks every week, anything minus 120 or better odds. We each make 3. Whoever is in last place gets assigned the slop game of the week. Diante, I thought you were, your response on the Anthony Richardson stuff was great, but I'm sorry, man. We got to give you the slop game of the week. You were 0-3 last week. You're now down with me at 12-12 on the season. Ruiz and I were 2-1. Ruiz is 16-8. I mean, this guy's, his head's going to get too big, Diante. What do we do here? We put the jinx on him or something?
I don't know what happened, because I feel like to start the year, everything was going so much better. For me specifically, I guess,
you started chasing the dopamine of the plus odds is what happened.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think I got a little high of my own supply there, and I've fallen off the rails. And I think that Steven's done a really good job, I think, of taking lines in games that are probably stretched a little bit too far and being able to pick up some easy wins. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that, because at the end of the day, I'm the one that's stuck with the slop game of the week right now. But yeah, I think I maybe need to adopt some of Steven's strategies and look for some singles instead of swinging for home runs.
That's
there
right.
You go. And Ruiz, the slop game of the week. What did we decide on here? Do you remember what the slop game of the week is?
I think it was Saints Panthers, wasn't it?
I think it was Saints Panthers. That's correct. It was either that or Patriots Titans, but we decided on Saints Panthers.
Is Jacoby Brissett playing, or is it Drake May?
We don't know yet. May still got going through the concussion protocol stuff. So
that game might be worse. That game might be worse.
Yeah. Well, we'll give you Saints Panthers. He can watch a little Bryce Young and Derek Carr's return there. All right. So as a group, we're 40-32. Hey, that's still good. I don't care that Ruiz is carrying us. I'm taking the team mentality, like Ruiz said, the name, what is it? Name on the front of the jersey, not the back. Right. So that's what we are, the Ringer NFL show. And as a group, we are 40-32. That's what I'm saying. That's pretty good, Ringer wise guys. I don't know what your record is, but 40-32 is pretty good here. All right. Let's get to the picks. Ruiz, since you're on fire, start us off.
I'm going to go to the Chargers-Browns game. And I've been saying a lot of nice things about Greg Roman this week. And I don't want him to embarrass me, but I'm going to say another good thing about him. I like the way he's calling plays on early downs. I like what he's getting out of Justin Herbert on early downs. He's letting them throw downfield. He's letting them throw off play action. I think they're going up against a defense that is very good at taking away the run. They're very good at loading the box and attacking the line of scrimmage. I think this should be a game where they're calling a lot of play actions on early downs and Justin Herbert's cooking. So I'm going to go over Justin Herbert, 227 passing yards. Please, Roman, do not make me regret saying nice things about you.
I actually had one from.
He's going to regret this, Diante.
Oh, 1,000%.
Yeah, he's going to regret
this.
Greg
Roman passing game against all this man coverage.
Against these corners and Myles Garrett.
My Halloween costume is an idiot.
There you go. All right. Chargers at Browns. I kind of like the Browns defense in that game, just their talent at corner versus, although Ladd McConkey, man, we probably haven't talked enough about Ladd McConkey. He was awesome last week there, but we'll see if Ruiz is still saying nice things about Greg Roman on Sunday.
McConkey's he's one of those white receivers where it's like hard to like actually tell what his skill set is. It's like, you're Wes Welker until you beat the allegations. It's one of those things, but he's like way better than he looks. He's not like just like a slot merchant.
Yeah, he's making contested catches.
Yeah, he can run, right.
Yeah. No he's doubt. More Edelman. I think he's more of an Edelman type. Like Edelman could move a little bit.
There you go. All right, Diante, so you have something from the same game?
I have the quarterback on the other side of this. I'm going Jameis Winston under 244.5 passing yards, which is minus 114. We talked a little bit about how Baltimore really struggled to show bodies in the middle of the field. If there's one thing that Jesse Minter has done an excellent job of, it's taking away the easy looks for offenses in the passing game. I think that they can defend the run about as well. Maybe not as well as Baltimore did, but I think that we've seen that Los Angeles has done a great job at scheming up ways to, hold offenses in the running game from creating explosive plays. And if you're able to get Jameis into those obvious passing situations, changing pictures, loading up the line of scrimmage, and being more detailed in your coverage looks, I think that that'll cause Winston some trouble, and that'll give them an opportunity to get home and affect him in the pocket in a way that Baltimore couldn't. So for that reason, I just don't think that the throwing windows will be as easy. So I've got Jameis going under on Sunday.
The Jameis interception prop is minus 198 on FanDuel. Wow. Like they are expecting him to throw an interception. He's itching to throw one. He was itching to throw one last week. So
he was itching to throw about three last week.
3 turnover worthy plays last week. Yeah, for Jameis.
We don't need to talk about that though. He played good ball. He's throwing the ball downfield. The Browns offense hasn't looked that good in years.
Honestly, I will say watching that game, and their offensive line has been criticized this year. Everybody, all the other 10 players on offense looked so much better with Jameis Winston at quarterback than Deshaun Watson. Stuff was on time, in rhythm. Now, sometimes he's thrown to the other team. Yes, but the offense was operating how the offense was supposed to operate. And I also watched it going, he is so much more talented than, I'm just talking talent over Deshaun Watson right now. Yeah. I was like, it isn't even close. Who has like a better skill set, which I don't know if I should have realized that right away, but it was pretty stark watching the same supporting cast, same play caller. And I'm like, he's clearly more talented than Deshaun Watson.
Jameis can hoop, man. Jameis, especially from the pocket, he can look like a top 10 quarterback at times. I think like the gap between him and like a Geno Smith, for instance, is like one of those high level pocket passers. He just can't avoid those mistakes. And I think he's just, to use Sheil's favorite word, a little too ambitious at times. Like he sees a window that he thinks is there that should be there based on the coverage, but things don't always happen like that. He's a little too book smart as a quarterback, I would say, and it gets him into trouble sometimes. It's kind of like similar to Trevor Lawrence is another player I would compare his game skill set as a passer, because I think Trevor's obviously more athletic than Jameis is.
Yeah.
Chargers are 1.5 point favorites in Cleveland for that game. Kind of an under the radar sort of potential for a fun game in that one. All right. My first pick, let me see. I'm looking at the 10 that I tweeted out and saying, which one of these do I actually want to go with? I'm going to go with the team I've been crushing. And it's the Dallas Cowboys, over 24.5 total points. Their offensive metrics are way worse than even I feel like I realized. They are 26th in offensive DVOA. Dak Prescott is 26th in dropback success rate, and he's tied for the highest rate of turnover-worthy plays in the NFL. We know it's not all Dak Prescott, even though I do think his decision-making has been an issue this year. It's a lot on the scheme and the supporting cast. But I look at that Falcons defense, and opponents are completing like 73% of their passes or something against them. And I don't buy their pass rush. And so I look at this game and I don't know if I could see the Cowboys winning this game. I like them a little bit +3, but more than anything, I think this is a game where the Cowboys are going to be able to move the football. I think even if they get down, they're going to throw it some more. We've seen that in the fourth quarter of some of these games. So I actually think Dak Prescott's going to play well in this game. The Cowboys offense is going to play well, and they're going to score more than 24.5 total points. Ruiz, what do you think about this Cowboys Falcons matchup?
No, yeah, I think I think he's going to put up a lot of numbers. And I don't think he played that bad last week. I know I said that on the midweek show. I said I kind of killed him on the Sunday show, but when you watch it again, his decision making is worse than it was last year, but it's like not worse when you consider the context. Like he's like throwing routes that shouldn't be well covered against certain coverages, and they are, just because everyone is just sitting on everything Dallas does. Like he'll throw like a quick out versus quarters, which should be there most of the time, and it's like there's a slot corner tight to the route because they know it's coming. So I think it's just a matter of time before Dak has one of those like Dak games where he throws for like 400 yards and 3 touchdowns, and it could be this week against a suspect Atlanta defense.
You know what? It reminds me a lot of the first half of the year for Josh Allen last season, where he was turning the ball over and people were really nitpicking every one of the turnovers and every one of the sacks. But when you go back and watch during the week, it's like, okay, that's probably the highest quality throw that you could make. He's just getting the worst possible outcome. I do think a bit of that is happening with Dak. The issue for Dallas and Dak is that there was so much confidence built into what Buffalo was doing that basically you were just kind of playing the averages, that our elite quarterback in this scheme with this supporting cast around him is going to figure it out. That doesn't necessarily exist for Prescott and for this Cowboys offense. So if there's a concern, I think that it's probably about even odds that it goes in the opposite direction of what Steven is selling, right? That he continues to have suppress and more bad things happen, which just continues this cycle of him having his back up against the wall, having to push the ball downfield and take the highest degree of difficulty throws and have to extend out of the pocket, even as guys are not separating. And we continue to see these issues. So that would be my concern. Sheil, and in response to what you said, I like the fact that we all kind of have our eyes on the same game. I'm also looking at Falcons Cowboys, and my second pick was going to be taking the Falcons as a 3-point favorite at -115 odds. I think if you look at the way that San Francisco moved the ball against Dallas's defense in the second and third quarters by really just playing that underneath game, going after yards after the catch, forcing them to tackle out in space, that's what Atlanta's been doing best when this offense has been working well, is getting the ball to Drake London, getting it to Kadero Hodge, getting it to Ray McCloud, pushing the ball in the seams to Kyle Pitts. When they're playing at their best, there's just so many different ways that they can attack you offensively when Kirk Cousins is confident in the pocket. And that doesn't even interface with the fact that they can do very similar things in the run game with Bijan Robinson that Kyle Shanahan can do with Jordan Mason and Isaac Guerrero behind his offensive line. So I just look at the balance that Atlanta can strike, especially against these weaker defenses. And that's what we've seen this year, is that they've done a really good job at beating up on weak defenses outside of the Seattle game, which was a disaster. I expect them to really be able to move the ball up and down the field. I do think that Dak will be able to play much better this upcoming week than he did against Dallas. So it might be a little bit back and forth, but I do think that Atlanta will be able to force more mistakes from Dallas's defense than the inverse.
It's kind of gone under discussed, this Falcons offense, honestly. Like, I'm thinking about just myself on this podcast. This is working out better than anyone probably could have predicted or hoped for. I mean, they're 6th in offensive DVOA. They're top 10 rushing and passing. Like you said, they're balanced, and what they're doing feels sustainable. They've got 2 backs, Bijan Robinson and Tyler Algier, and they're spreading the ball out a little bit. You don't know who's going to get it each week. So yeah, I don't know if it's going to last the entire season, but if you just like put out the numbers to their first 8 weeks of the season before the year, you would have been like, yes, if you're a Falcons fan, I'll sign up for that. Absolutely. So yeah, that's a big one in Atlanta. Cowboys, Falcons. Ruiz, what do you got?
My second one, I'm going to go with the Rams over their point total, 24.5. You're going up against a defense in Seattle that could be missing Reek Woolen, that could be missing Devin Witherspoon. And this is a team that's had problems covering the middle of the field, defending the middle of the field, defending the run. I think this could be a game where Sean McVay just, he you get like a 40-point Sean McVay outburst from this offense. Because last week we saw them go up against Minnesota. They got the receivers back. Kyron Williams is out there. I think this team is really hard to defend. And I think it's going to be more like the offense we expected to see in the preseason when we were a little bit higher on them. They still have to wait to get some offensive linemen back and really get healthy there. That's when I think we'll really see this offense take off in the second half like they did last year. But I think this is a great matchup for a Sean McVay offense. And I think Seattle's defense is going to struggle to stop them on any down in any situation.
Yeah, I don't see how Seattle gets a single stop on Sunday against this offense.
They're a sleeper in the NFC, the Los Angeles Rams. I mean, they kind of were this forgotten team because everybody's injured and you're like, all right, they're not their year. Offensive line, you got 3 guys out before the season starts. Nakua goes out, Kupp goes out, and they're hanging in there. And they're overperforming the rest of their talent because they've got Stafford and McVay, and their pass rush. Like, I was very skeptical. Everyone's, they drafted 2 defensive linemen. I'm like, give me a break. When do defensive linemen come in the league and rush the passer well right away? Well, their pass rush has been good. You trust the quarterback. You trust the coach. I mean, I'm keeping my eye on that team here in the second half of the season. Yeah, they go to Seattle and are 1.5-point favorites. I'm not saying I don't know that the defense is good enough overall. And Ruiz, you mentioned it, the offensive line, there are still some injuries there, but they're going to move the ball pretty much any given week. They have shown that regardless of who's in, who's out. And now that Kupp and Nakua are back, I don't know. They very well could be a dangerous team here in the NFC. All right, you each went 2, right? So I'm up here. I'm looking at my chart. I'm like Mike McCarthy, looking at the call sheet here. What am I going to call 3rd and 8? Dak,
triple
do
slants.
Something. Double slants, slant flat. Yeah, here we go. You got this, Dak. All right, I'm going to go Eagles, Jaguars. Dougie P making his return to Lincoln Financial Field. Maybe or maybe not getting on the plane ride back to Jacksonville after this one. But I'm going to go to a prop. A.J. Brown over 79.5 receiving yards. This Jaguars defense is the worst in the NFL by DVOA, by passing DVOA. Other metrics you want to look at, they haven't rushed the passer well. And you've got the Eagles offensive line last week with 2 backups in there was incredible. You would have thought like they just had all 5 all-pros there. Jalen Hurts was just sitting back there in the pocket all game long. So I think they're going to be able to attack the Jacksonville Jaguars here in the passing game. I did notice on film a couple instances where A.J. Brown looked like he maybe thought he should have gotten the ball. So I know the coaches are noticing that, and they're going to get him the ball early in this game. They're going to throw him some jump balls in this game, and I like A.J. Brown to have a big game over 79.5 receiving yards.
Sheil, you and I have been in lockstep throughout these picks because my pick was also from this game, and I'm actually taking Devontae Smith going over 55.5 yards. And I'm thinking similarly to you. I think that I'm taking Devontae Smith because Jalen Hurts can look and say like, all right, Tyson Campbell, when you're healthy, you're a legitimate one-on-one corner. Not that I would expect him to hold A.J. Brown down because nobody in the NFL can really play consistently down after down against what he can do in jump ball and contested catch situations. But if you get Devontae Smith in the slot against a Darnell Savage, or you get him in that Z spot against who am I missing? Not Andre Cisco, but Ronald Darby when he was playing, or DeAndre Prince, what you can do to kind of manipulate this team, knowing that they play so much man, knowing that they want to try to use that 4-down rush to get after the quarterback. If this offensive line can stand as tall as they did last week, I think that there are going to be so many opportunities for Jalen Hurts to push the ball down the field in a way that, just like last week, leads us to walk away from Sunday saying like, hey, maybe this offense has evolved, when really it's probably just more a product of you can put Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown in these guaranteed win situations when you know you're getting man coverage, when you know you're going to get some kind of match coverage. I think you're going to get a lot of the same on Sunday. So I expect them to roll on offense again, assuming that they're able to keep Jalen Hurts upright and clean in the pocket.
Yeah, I feel like we called this when the receivers were coming back. Like if you just go back to the spam vertical deep shots outside the numbers to your stud receivers, like it will work, especially against A.J. Brown. So I was looking at the A.J. Brown overs in this game too. Ultimately decided to go away from it, but I support the bet.
There we go. All right, Ruiz, what do you have? What's your third? Diante gave us his third one there, right? Yeah. So Ruiz, What is your third one?
I wanted to take the Travis Kelce over on receptions, but it wasn't out yet. I was willing to take it blind, but I didn't want to, I didn't want to cheat here. I wasn't going to do that. So I'm going to go to the Dolphins-Bills game. I'm going to take the Tua interception prop the odds weren't good enough. It's minus 135, but I'm going to go with longest pass under 37.5 going up against that Bills defense. I think the one thing the Bills defense is definitely going to do is try to take away the deep ball. I think they're going to play a lot of too high zone. I think they're going to put a roof over that offense. And I think it's going to be effective. I wanted the interception prop because the way they play defense and the way Tua throws the football, he wants to anticipate those in breakers. I just envision like one of these quarter safeties, like breaking on the route and jumping in front of it and picking it off. But I do think they're going to sell out to stop the deep ball. Maybe that's a big day for Miami's run game as a result. But I do think Sean McDermott, that's going to be his main focus. And he's been coaching his ass off with this defense. I've been critical of him in the past, but he's doing it with a young secondary. They lost Hyde, they lost Poyer. It's like Hamlin and Taylor Rapp, and they're playing just as well as those other guys did in years past.
Do you know which offense in the NFL has the fewest 20-plus yard plays this season?
I'm going to guess the Dolphins.
Miami Dolphins. Now, listen, I know Tua's only played 3 games, but come on now, 16 explosive plays below the New England Patriots and the Las Vegas Raiders and the Tennessee Titans and the Cleveland Browns with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. That has not been a good sign. Again, I know Tua has not been on the field for all of those, but still, that surprised me when I looked at that. The Ravens have 41 such plays and the Dolphins have 16. 25 Ridiculous. More explosive plays for the Baltimore Ravens. And those odds on the 2 interceptions is a little bit surprising that it's that, what you said, minus 130 something, huh? So they're really expecting
the Bills,
him
man.
to throw
They give him problems.
Yeah.
And I think that, and I don't want to, because Tua hasn't played, it's hard to have this conversation because it's just difficult to extricate quarterback from this style of offense, specifically the way that Tua operates it versus their backups and knowing how poor of quality their backups have been. But you look, they're 27th on throws on EPA on throws of 10 or more air yards and 31st on throws of 20 or more air yards. That to me says that like defenses are just sitting on this stuff vertically and forcing them to play another way. And I think that for them, and I think the opposite was happening with Tampa Bay before their guys got hurt. For Miami, the issue has been the stuff that's within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage is not popping for explosive plays the way that it was. Those bubble screens, those swing screens, those RPOs out into the flat, they're not turning those into 15, 20-yard gains in the ways that they were when this offense was operating at their best, which is why I think you can just kind of feel how palpable that pressure, that squeeze from every defense they play is on a game-by-game basis. Even having Tua back last week, like they were able to work the intermediate areas of the field a couple of times. And I think that that's always going to happen because Mike McDaniel's just so good at scheming guys open in the play action passing game and getting the ball out quickly. But you go back and look, and so much of that was like they're playing faster than they usually do. It was even faster than normal trying to get the ball out of Tua's hands. It's really difficult to do that against Sean McDermott because he does such a good job of coaching his guys up to sit on routes. And you can use their game against Seattle last week as a great example of that. When DK Metcalf wasn't in there as a vertical stretcher, they were just taking away everything that Miami wanted to do, or not Miami, that Seattle wanted to do to Buffalo's defense, because they did not have to worry about the ball being pushed vertically. If you're not willing to hold the ball in the pocket to do so, it's going to be really difficult to move the ball against the Sean McDermott defense.
You're actually seeing that kind of phenomenon across the league with these Shanahan offenses, like specifically the guys that coach under Shanahan. Last year, they were still seeing a lot of cover 3, even though the rest of the league was seeing a lot of cover 2. This year, all the Shanahan offenses, including Houston, including San Francisco, and of course, Miami, are seeing a bunch of cover 2 and 2 high zone. Like, in fact, like CJ Stroud has seen it more than any other quarterback in the league. He has the most dropbacks against cover 2. So I think the defenses around the league kind of as a whole were like, we're not going to like play your games anymore. We're not going to play cover 3. We're not going to sell out to stop the run. We're going to sit on these routes vertically. We're going to make you throw underneath. We're going to make you play patiently, like you haven't had to before. And I think we're seeing all 3 of those offenses struggle in their own ways to different degrees based on the talent they have around them. Obviously, Miami's had not only the worst quarterback, but they've had a lot of injuries, and that's made it hard to sustain their offense.
Yeah, I like the call outs to Sean McDermott. He is doing a fantastic job. And playoffs have been one thing, but in the regular season, he has not coached a bad defense in Buffalo. And they've had years where they have been banged up and they've had some very talented units, but they've had other years where they've been injured. This year, you looked at it on paper and said they're going to have a tough time getting there. And they've played really well so far this season. So I like that one quite a bit. All right, I'm going to finish with the stupidest bet, maybe of the year for the show. Let's go to the slop game of the week. And let's just fade that Panthers defense a little bit. Okay. And Derek Carr comes back. You can score 27 points. Derek Carr, right? Their over is 26.5 for the New Orleans Saints team total. I'm going to take over 26.5 points for the New Orleans Saints. They beat the Panthers 47-10 in week 1. I like this for a number of reasons. 1, because that Panthers defense stinks. 2, because that Panthers defense isn't going to be sustaining a lot of drives. So you're going to get a lot of possessions. If you're the Saints, you're going to get a lot of opportunities here to score the football. You're probably going to get a couple turnovers from that Panthers offense. So I just feel like there's a nice mix there where you can at least get to 27 points. What could go wrong? What could go wrong? A Saints team that's lost 6 in a row. I'm counting on them to score 27 points.
Carolina's best defensive performance of the year was 22 points to Gardner Minshew, I think. So I don't know. I think it's a safe bet. This could be the worst team in like modern NFL history outside of like the 0-16 Lions. Their point differential and like compared to the rest of the league, it's insane.
It's crazy. Yeah. To everything you look at statistically is like, wow, this could be an all-time bad team. By the way, draft position game here right now. Panthers would have the first pick. The Saints would have the 6th pick here in the draft. That's one draft position game. The other one, Titans-Patriots. Titans would pick 2nd if the season ended today. Patriots would pick 3rd. So there's no, number 1 prize maybe as there has been in previous years with the quarterback, but still.
Travis Hunter, get ready to keep pounding.
He could probably play quarterback for this team. Let's be honest.
They could definitely use him playing both ways.
That's
on that
147 minus 147 after 8 games. That's almost 20 points a game.
That's insane.
17 crazy. Points a game, I think.
That's how a team that's lost 6 in a row in the Saints is a road favorite of 7 points because of how bad the Panthers have been there. All right, let's recap our picks here. I've got Cowboys over 24.5 total points, Saints over 26.5 total points, and AJ Brown over 79.5 receiving yards. I don't like it. I got 3 overs. That is the Philadelphian in me is like, what are you doing right now? You should be picking
unders. Spend some time in LA, man. You're going soft.
That's right. I think that is what happened. I got to shake this off. If I go 0-3, that's my excuse. And next week I come back with 3 unders. Diante, what do you got this week?
I've got Jameis Winston going under 244.5 passing yards. I've got the Falcons covering 3-point as a 3-point favorite. And I've got Devontae Smith going over 55.5 receiving yards.
And I have Justin Herbert over 227 passing yards, the Rams over 24.5 points, and Tua's longest pass under 37.5 yards.
There you go. I'll be fine. I'll be watching that Dolphins game. Did he chuck one downfield or not? Does Ruiz win that bet or not? We'll be keeping our eyes on all the action in week 9. I love no London. Thank you. No London game. Just let's get it started.
No kidding.
When football is supposed to start at 1:00. All due respect, of course, to our London listeners who may not enjoy watching those games in what was it? Wembley. Yeah, Wembley. There you go. But yes, no Europe game this week. So that's a nice thing. All right. We'll be back Sunday night recapping all of the week 9 NFL action. Remember, check out Ringer NFL channel on YouTube. Check out our guy, Diante Lee, surprising us with the Halloween costume. Everyone have a good weekend. We'll talk to you Sunday night on the Ringer NFL show.
Whoopee!